All right, so are you ready to like peek under the hood of the most complex structure in the known universe?
The human brain?
Yeah. I mean, it's like you handed us a textbook and said, okay, make this fascinating and also make it like the Cliff Notes version.
Sounds like a challenge.
Definitely. But buckle up because today we're diving deep into some serious neuroscience.
You know, it's funny. Sometimes even I forget just how awe-inspiring the brain is. I mean, this 3-pound organ is running the whole show.
Right.
Every thought, every feeling, even just like that little voice in your head saying, do I need more coffee?
Yeah.
That's all thanks to these intricate structures in your brain working together.
It's kind of crazy how we take for granted that we can just think.
Yeah.
But there's this whole symphony of activity happening in there that we're totally oblivious to.
Exactly.
So today we're going to pull back the curtain and give you a glimpse of how it all works.
We'll be highlighting all the major players, explaining what they do, how they interact, and even what happens when things go wrong. By the end of this, you'll have a solid grasp of how your brain creates your reality.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious part, like the thing we all picture when we think brain.
The wrinkled walnut-looking thing?
Yeah, exactly.
The neocortex.
The neocortex.
That's it. It's the outermost layer, and it's massive. It actually covers almost the entire brain underneath.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. Despite its complexity, it has a remarkably uniform structure. 6 distinct layers, repeated throughout. It's like nature found this perfect blueprint for processing information and just like copied and pasted it everywhere.
Oh, that's interesting. So kind of like how a computer uses the same basic components.
Yes.
Just arranged in different ways to achieve different tasks.
Exactly. And this efficient design is what allows the neocortex to handle everything from your senses to your most complex thoughts and decisions.
Okay, but how does all that information even get to the neocortex in the first place? Like, are there tiny USB ports plugged into our eyeballs and ears?
Well, not quite USB ports, but there's a central hub that relays all that sensory data. It's called the thalamus.
The thalamus.
And it acts as this ultimate gatekeeper, filtering and directing information between the neocortex and the rest of the body.
So it's like Grand Central Station for your senses.
Yeah.
Think of it like that.
So every sight, sound, taste, touch.
Yep.
It all has to pass through thalamus customs before it reaches the neocortex.
Pretty much. There's one interesting exception, though.
Oh, really? What's that?
Smell. The olfactory system actually bypasses the thalamus and has a direct line to the neocortex.
Smell gets VIP access. Why is that?
It's still a bit of a mystery, but it could be related to the fact that smell is one of our oldest senses, evolutionarily speaking. But even smell eventually loops back to the thalamus, suggesting it still plays a role in integrating olfactory information with our other senses.
So it's like, even though smell gets to skip the line, it still has to check in with the main office eventually.
Exactly.
And while we're on the topic of the thalamus, there's another fascinating structure within it that we should mention, the pulvinar.
The pulvinar. Ooh, that sounds kind of like a superhero's secret lair or something.
Well, it's less about secret layers and more about attention and focus.
Okay.
The pulvinar helps filter out irrelevant visual information so you can focus on what's important.
So in this world of constant visual stimulation,
Yeah.
the pulvinar is basically what keeps us from getting overwhelmed by all the input.
Exactly. Imagine you're walking down a busy street.
Okay.
Your pulvinar is what allows you to like find your friend in the crowd or spot that new coffee shop you wanted to try.
Right.
Without getting distracted by all the other sights and sounds.
That's a pretty vital job. It's like having a personal assistant for your eyeballs, making sure they're looking at the right things.
Precisely. And it's not just about filtering information either.
Oh.
The pulvinar also plays a role in coordinating eye movements, which is crucial for tracking objects and navigating our surroundings.
This is making me realize just how much work our brains are doing behind the scenes without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another unsung hero of the brain, the cerebellum.
Okay, I remember this one from biology class.
Yeah.
It's that little cauliflower-shaped thing at the back of the brain, right?
That's the one.
But I thought it was mostly about balance and coordination.
It is, but it's involved in so much more than just that. It's actually packed with neurons.
Really?
Possibly more than the rest of the brain combined.
Wow.
And while it's definitely crucial for balance and movement, it also plays a role in learning memory and even language processing.
Wait, seriously, that little thing is involved in all of that? So what does it actually do with all that brain power?
Well, when it comes to movement, think of it as the ultimate choreographer.
Yeah.
It takes commands from the neocortex and fine-tunes them, smoothing out our actions and making them effortless.
So it's why we can walk and talk and even dance without consciously thinking about every muscle movement. So it's like the behind-the-scenes crew for our bodies, making sure the performance goes off without a hitch.
I like that analogy.
But what happens if the cerebellum gets damaged? I mean, it seems pretty important.
You'd think it would be catastrophic, right?
Yeah.
But the brain is incredibly adaptable. While severe damage can cause problems with coordination and movement,
Yeah.
there are even documented cases of people born without a cerebellum who lead surprisingly normal lives.
Wait, what? No cerebellum and they can still walk and talk?
Yep.
That's mind-blowing. How is that even possible?
It's a testament to the brain's plasticity. Other areas like the cortex can step up and take over some of the cerebellum's functions. It's like the brain has a backup generator that kicks in when the main power goes out.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder just how much potential our brains have that we're not even tapping into.
Exactly. And it highlights the fact that we're still just beginning to understand the full capabilities of this incredible organ.
Okay, so we've got this massive neocortex processing information. The thalamus acting as the gatekeeper. The pulvinar keeping us focused, and the cerebellum fine-tuning our movements.
Oh.
It's like a well-oiled machine with each part playing a crucial role. But what about memory?
Yes.
Where does that fit into the picture?
That's where the hippocampus comes in. Our brain's memory maestro. It's this small seahorse-shaped structure nestled deep within the temporal lobe, and it's essential for forming new memories.
So the hippocampus is like the brain's filing cabinet.
Okay.
Storing all our experiences and knowledge.
It's more like a temporary holding area. It receives input from all over the neocortex, creating a kind of short-term memory buffer for new information and experiences.
Okay.
Then during sleep, it plays those memories back.
Really?
Helping to consolidate them and transfer them back to the neocortex for long-term storage.
So our brains are basically replaying our day while we sleep, like a mental highlight reel.
That's a great way to put it. And this process is crucial for turning those fleeting experiences into lasting memories, which is why they say getting enough sleep is so important for learning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've definitely noticed that when I'm sleep deprived, I have a harder time remembering things.
Yeah.
It's like my brain hasn't had a chance to properly file away the memories.
Makes sense.
But here's a question. If the hippocampus is damaged, can you still form any new memories?
It depends on the extent of the damage, but it can definitely have a profound impact on memory formation. One of the most famous cases is that of Henry Molaison, or patient HM, who had parts of his hippocampus removed to treat severe epilepsy.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about him. Didn't he end up with amnesia?
He did. The surgery was successful in reducing his seizures, but it left him with a severe inability to form new memories.
Wow.
It was a tragic situation, but it provided invaluable insights into the role of the hippocampus in memory.
It's amazing to think that this one small structure is so crucial for something as fundamental as memory.
Absolutely. And it highlights the fact that even though the brain works as a whole, different regions have specialized functions.
Okay, so we've got the neocortex processing information, the thalamus acting as the gatekeeper, the pulvinar helping us focus, the cerebellum coordinating our movements, and the hippocampus handling our memories.
Right.
What other key players are there in this incredible neural orchestra?
Well, no brain tour would be complete without talking about language.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's what sets us apart from other animals, right? Our ability to communicate complex ideas, tell stories, share knowledge. It's all thanks to these amazing structures tucked away in our brains.
Totally. And I know there are a couple of key areas involved in language processing, Wernicke's and Broca's areas, right?
Oh, got it.
But I always get them mixed up. Which one's which again?
No worries. It's a common confusion.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. Wernicke's area located in the temporal lobe is all about understanding language.
Okay.
It's like your brain's internal dictionary and grammar guide, helping you make sense of words and sentences.
So when I hear someone speaking, Wernicke's area is what helps me decode the sounds and figure out what they mean.
Exactly. It connects to those vast networks of meaning in your brain, helping you retrieve the right concepts and understand the nuances of grammar and sentence structure.
Okay, cool. And what about Broca's area? Where does that fit in?
Broca's area, located in the frontal lobe, is all about producing language.
Oh, okay.
It's what helps you plan and execute the complex movements of your tongue, lips, and vocal cords to actually speak those words.
So it's like Broca's area is the director.
Yeah.
Orchestrating all the tiny muscle movements needed to get those words out.
That's a great analogy, and here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
These language centers are primarily located on the left side of the brain in most people.
Huh.
It's a great example of what we call hemispheric specialization, where different sides of the brain take on different roles.
Wait, so our brains have specialized sides. Does that mean the right side just sits there twiddling its thumbs while the left side does all the work?
Not at all. The right side has its own unique contributions to language,
Oh, okay.
like processing tone of voice, emotional nuances, and the overall context of a conversation.
Interesting.
It's like the right side is reading between the lines, adding those subtle layers of meaning that make communication so rich.
So it's like a team effort with the left side handling the nuts and bolts of grammar and vocabulary, and the right side adding the color commentary and emotional depth.
Precisely. And it highlights the fact that language is so much more than just words on a page. It's this complex tapestry woven from verbal and nonverbal cues, and both sides of the brain play a crucial role in understanding and producing it.
That's fascinating. It makes me wonder what happens if someone has damage to their right hemisphere. Would they have trouble understanding sarcasm or humor, even if they could grasp the literal meaning of the words?
That's a great question. And it's something researchers are still exploring. But yes, damage to certain areas on the right side of the brain can make it difficult to pick up on those subtle cues and understand the full meaning of what someone is saying.
Wow, so it's like they're missing part of the story, even if they can technically read the words. Okay, moving on. We've talked about how our brains process language, but what about recognizing faces? I mean, how do we instantly know who someone is, even if we haven't seen them in years?
That's the magic of the fusiform face area, or FFA for short. It's a specialized region in the temporal lobe that's specifically tuned to processing faces.
So it's like our brain has a dedicated facial recognition software.
Exactly, and it's incredibly efficient. The FFA can distinguish between thousands of different faces and recognize familiar ones even after years have passed.
But how does it actually do that? Does it store like a mental image of every face we've ever encountered?
It's not quite like storing photographs. It's more about recognizing patterns and features that are unique to faces.
Okay.
Things like the distance between our eyes, the shape of our nose, the curve of our lips. The FFA is attuned to those subtle details that make each face unique.
So it's like our brain has developed a code for deciphering faces, allowing us to quickly identify individuals without having to consciously analyze every feature.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting. The FFA can actually become even more specialized in certain individuals.
Really?
For example, someone who's an expert in bird watching might develop a superpowered FFA for distinguishing between different species of birds.
Whoa, so our brains can actually adapt and rewire themselves based on our interests and expertise.
Absolutely. Think about your own passions and hobbies.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed how you effortlessly pick up on details that others miss? That's your brain's amazing plasticity at work, fine-tuning itself to the things you care about most.
That's so cool. It's like our brains are constantly evolving, becoming more efficient and specialized based on how we interact with the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered language, we've covered faces. What about emotions? Where do they fit into this neural landscape?
Emotions. That brings us to the amygdala, the brain's emotional powerhouse.
The amygdala.
It's a small, almond-shaped structure nestled deep within the temporal lobe, and it's responsible for processing strong emotional responses like fear, anger, and disgust.
So it's like the amygdala is our internal alarm system.
Yeah. Always on the lookout for potential threats.
That's a great way to put it. It's constantly scanning our environment and our internal state for anything that might signal danger or trigger a strong emotional response.
But how does it actually know what's dangerous? I mean, a spider might be scary to me, but it's just another bug to a bird.
That's a great question. The amygdala learns through experience. If you have a negative encounter with something like being bitten by a spider or having a bad fall, the amygdala will form a strong association between that experience and the fear response.
So it's like our brain is learning to avoid pain and danger by associating them with negative emotions.
Exactly. And it's not just about learning from our own experiences. We can also learn from observing others.
Oh, interesting.
If you see someone else react fearfully to something, your amygdala can pick up on those cues and learn to avoid that thing as well.
So it's like a social learning system, helping us stay safe by learning from the experiences of those around us.
Precisely. And this ability to learn from others is crucial for our survival as social creatures.
Yeah.
This is making me think about all those times I felt like a sudden surge of fear or anxiety, even when there wasn't any obvious danger present.
Right.
It's like my amygdala was reacting to some subconscious cue that I wasn't even aware of.
That's a great point, and it highlights the fact that our emotions aren't always under our conscious control.
Yeah.
The amygdala can react quickly and automatically, often before our conscious mind even has time to process what's happening.
So it's like our body is already reacting before our mind even catches up. That's kind of wild.
It is, and it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay.
In a dangerous situation, a quick instinctive reaction could mean the difference between life and death. But in our modern world, where we're not constantly facing life or death threats, this automatic response can sometimes lead to unnecessary anxiety or fear.
That makes sense. So learning to manage those automatic responses, those knee-jerk reactions, is probably a key part of maintaining emotional well-being, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where other parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, come into play.
Ah, the prefrontal cortex. We haven't talked about that one yet. What's its role in all of this?
The prefrontal cortex is often called the executive function center of the brain. It's located right at the front behind your forehead, and it's involved in all of those higher-level cognitive functions that set us apart from other animals. Things like planning, decision-making, working memory, and impulse control.
So if the amygdala is our emotional bodyguard, the prefrontal cortex is like the rational strategist weighing the options and making sure we don't overreact.
That's a great way to put it. The prefrontal cortex helps us regulate our emotions, make thoughtful decisions, and plan for the future. It's what allows us to override those automatic impulses and choose a more measured response.
So it's like this constant tug-of-war between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, with our emotions pulling us one way and our rational mind trying to steer us in another direction.
Exactly. And the strength of that prefrontal control can vary depending on a lot of factors, like genetic stress levels and even how much sleep we've had.
Wow. It's like a delicate balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it makes you realize how much of our behavior is influenced by factors we might not even be aware of.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of taking care of our brains, both physically and mentally. Getting enough sleep, managing stress, and engaging in activities that challenge our cognitive abilities can all help strengthen those prefrontal control mechanisms.
Okay, so we've got the amygdala triggering those gut-level emotional responses, and the prefrontal cortex stepping in to provide some rational oversight. It's like a dynamic duo working together to keep our emotions in check and guide our behavior. But what about those times when our prefrontal cortex seems to take a vacation? I mean, we've all had moments where we've acted impulsively or let our emotions get the better of us. What's happening in the brain during those moments?
Well, sometimes the amygdala's alarm bells can be so loud that they drown out the prefrontal cortex's calmer voice. It's like when a fire alarm goes off. You don't stop to ponder the situation, you just react.
I can definitely relate to that. It's like those times when you say something you regret in the heat of the moment, and then later you're like, why did I say that?
Exactly. In those moments, the amygdala is in the driver's seat, triggering a rapid automatic response before the prefrontal cortex has a chance to weigh in.
So it's like our emotional autopilot kicks in, and we're reacting on instinct rather than reason.
Precisely. And it highlights the fact that our brains are wired for survival. Those quick, instinctive reactions were crucial for our ancestors who faced constant threats in their environment. But in our modern world, where those threats are less immediate, learning to manage those impulses is essential for navigating social situations and making sound decisions.
Okay, so we've talked about the neocortex, the thalamus, the pulvinar, the cerebellum, the hippocampus, Wernicke's and Broca's areas, the fusiform face area, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. We're really making our way through this brain tour, but I have a feeling there's still a few more stops on our itinerary. What else is on the list?
So are you ready to delve into some more fascinating brain structures?
Oh, absolutely. We've already covered so much ground. The cortex, the thalamus, that pulvinar thing, the cerebellum, the hippocampus, all those language and facial recognition areas, the amygdala and our prefrontal cortex. It's like a whirlwind tour of our inner universe.
It is. And today we're going even deeper, exploring those structures that work tirelessly behind the scenes to keep us functioning.
Sounds good.
Let's start with the basal ganglia. Have you ever wondered how you can brush your teeth without thinking or drive home on autopilot?
Yeah, actually I have.
That's the work of the basal ganglia, a cluster of structures deep within the brain.
Okay. The basal ganglia. What do they do exactly?
They're like the brain's smooth operators, making sure our movements are fluid, our habits are ingrained, and our reward system is firing on all cylinders.
Reward system. So the basal ganglia are involved in pleasure and motivation too.
Absolutely. They play a key role in how we learn from experience, especially when it comes to rewards and punishments. Think about those times you felt that rush of satisfaction after achieving a goal or mastering a new skill. That's the basal ganglia at work, releasing dopamine and reinforcing those positive behaviors.
So it's like our brain's internal cheerleader giving us a pat on the back when we do something right.
Exactly. And this reinforcement loop is crucial for habit formation. When we repeat a behavior that leads to a reward, the connections in the basal ganglia strengthen, making that behavior more automatic.
That explains why it's so hard to break bad habits. Those neural pathways are well-trodden. But if we're forming these strong connections with repeated actions, does that mean we're stuck with our habits forever?
Not necessarily. The brain is amazingly adaptable even in adulthood.
Oh, that's good.
Breaking bad habits involves disrupting those ingrained patterns and forging new ones. It takes effort and conscious awareness, but it is possible to rewire those neural circuits.
That's good news. It means we have more control over our behavior than we might think. But rewiring those deeply ingrained habits, it sounds like a pretty challenging task. Where do you even start?
It's about creating new patterns and reinforcing them consistently. It's like learning a new dance routine.
Yeah.
At first, it takes focus and effort, but with practice, it becomes more automatic and eventually feels effortless.
So consistency is key.
Absolutely. And finding ways to make those new behaviors rewarding helps solidify those neural connections.
This is making me think about all those times I've tried to start a new exercise routine or stick to a healthier diet, only to fall back into old patterns. Maybe I haven't been tapping into my basal ganglia's reward system effectively enough.
That could be part of it. It's about finding ways to make those new behaviors enjoyable and intrinsically motivating, not just something you have to do.
That's a great insight. It's not just about willpower, it's about finding ways to make those positive changes feel rewarding in themselves. Okay, so we've covered the basal ganglia, those habit-forming reward seekers. What other fascinating structures are lurking in the depths of our brains?
Well, we can't forget about the brainstem. It might not be as glamorous as the cortex, but it's literally the lifeline between your brain and the rest of your body.
Oh yeah, the brainstem. I remember it from anatomy class. It's that stalk-like structure at the base of the brain connecting to the spinal cord. But to be honest, I don't really know what it does.
Think of it as your brain's control center for all those essential functions that keep you alive and kicking.
Okay.
Breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, swallowing, those are all regulated by the brainstem. It's also involved in sleep-wake cycles, alertness, and even pain perception.
So it's like the unsung hero of the brain working tirelessly behind the scenes to keep everything running smoothly.
Exactly. It's constantly monitoring your internal state and making adjustments to maintain a stable internal environment.
It's amazing to think that all of that is happening without us even being aware of it. We just breathe, and our heart beats, and we rarely give a second thought to how it all works.
It's a testament to the elegant design of the brain. Those essential functions are automated so we can focus on higher-level tasks.
Okay, so the brainstem keeps the lights on and the engine running. What other behind-the-scenes wizards are we meeting today?
Let's talk about the hypothalamus. It's a tiny structure nestled just above the brainstem, but it has a huge impact on our lives. It's like the brain's master regulator, controlling everything from body temperature and hunger to sleep-wake cycles and hormone release.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility for such a small structure. How does it manage all of that?
It's a master communicator, constantly receiving information from the body and sending out signals to keep everything in balance.
Okay.
Think of it like the brain's thermostat constantly adjusting to maintain a stable internal environment. But it's so much more than just temperature control. It's also involved in our stress response, our emotional reactions, and even our reproductive behaviors.
So it's like the hypothalamus is the conductor of this intricate symphony of hormones, making sure everything is in sync and responding appropriately to the demands of our environment.
That's a great way to put it. And it highlights the interconnectedness of our physical and mental states. When we're stressed, our hypothalamus triggers the release of hormones like cortisol, which can affect everything from our mood and energy levels to our immune function.
This is making me think about all those times I've felt stressed or anxious and how those emotions have manifested physically, like a racing heart, sweaty palms, that feeling of butterflies in my stomach. It's like my hypothalamus was sounding the alarm, preparing my body for fight or flight.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that our brains and bodies are constantly communicating and influencing each other. Learning to manage stress and cultivate a sense of calm can have a positive impact on both our mental and physical well-being.
Wow. This has been an incredible journey. We've explored so many fascinating structures and learned so much about how our brains shape our thoughts, emotions, and actions. I'm feeling a newfound sense of appreciation for this amazing organ we carry around in our heads.
Me too. And it's a reminder that we're still just beginning to unlock the mysteries of the brain. There's so much more to discover, and each new insight brings us closer to understanding what it truly means to be human.
I love that. It's a journey of discovery that never really ends. Thanks for being our guide on this incredible brain venture.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep those brains buzzing with curiosity. There's a whole universe waiting to be explored inside your own head. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.